In this section, we're going to look at the equations of circles. So let's go ahead and look at the standard form of a circle. So the standard form of a circle looks like this. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. For this, HK is the center. So H and K will both be numbers here. And HK and the R here is the radius. That'll be a number as well. Your X and your Y are variables, so they will remain variables in the problem. So let's look at what this will look like here. So if we have the equation y minus 3 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 4, then the center of this equation, well, it's not letting me. All right, let's see here. Let me get the pen. All right, so our center is going to be at positive 3, negative 4. Okay, so we're looking at positive 3, negative 4. We're taking the opposite signs of what we have there. You can sort of think of transformations. When things are inside of the parentheses, they go in the opposite direction. So positive 3, negative 4, that point is right here on this graph. And the radius of this is actually going to be, our radius is going to be 2, because if we look back at that standard form, this is going to equal our radius squared. So if we have 4, that is the same as 2 squared. So our radius is the square root of this number over here that the equation equals. So if I have a radius of 2, from this point I could go up 2, I could go down 2, I could go to the right 2, and I could go to the left 2. And then if I draw in the circle that goes through those points, it's going to look something like that. That, of course, is a terrible looking circle, but you can probably do a little bit better on your paper. This is hard to write on here on this laptop. So this would be the graph of our circle. Let's look at a couple more. So these problems all give us the equation and then ask us to find the center and the radius. So for example 1 here, my center would be at positive 3, negative 1. We use the opposite sign of both of those numbers. And then the radius would not be 64, but it would be the square root of 64, which is 8. Okay. For example 2, our center would be at 0, positive 9. Now, with that x, you don't have a number inside the parentheses, so the number that would be there would be 0. And then, of course, we'll take the opposite sign of the 9 here. Now, for our radius for this one, our radius here is going to be the square root of 14. So the square root of 14 is, of course, not a perfect square. So for this, if you needed to graph that, you would just get a decimal and approximate the answer there. So that's what you would do for that problem. Our next one is going to be a center at 3, 0, and then we will have a radius of, we got to take the square root of 484, and if you might have it memorized, but probably you might need a calculator there, it's going to be 22. And then our last one has a center at the origin at 0, 0. And our radius would be the square root of 24. Now what you may see right here is you might see that broken down because the square root of 24 is 4 times 6. So they might break that down into 2 root 6 as well. So You might see that when you're looking at the answer keys and whatnot for these problems. All right, so graphing these, finding the center and radius are fairly straightforward. We also want to be able to write the equation of a circle. So if I look at number 1, if I have a center at 3, 4, and a radius of 5, I'm just going to have x minus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared. And that is going to equal 25. And here I did 25 because we're going to do the radius squared for that one. Writing the equation for the next one, I would have x plus 1 squared plus, and right here I could just put y squared. If you want, you could put y plus 0 squared, but that's just sort of unnecessary there. And this is going to equal 3 squared, and 3 squared is 9. So that would be the equation of this circle. And then for 3, we have a center at negative 4, 7, and a radius of 2, so that would look like this. X plus 4 squared plus y minus 7 squared is going to equal 2 squared, which is 4. So this is how we would write the equation if we know the center and the radius. So those are fairly straightforward as well. Now, whenever we see a lot of these equations, they are not going to be given to us in standard form for a circle. So we need to be able to tell how something is a circle, if something is a circle or not. So if an equation's highest degree x term is x squared and its highest degree y term is y squared, and they are both positive, or they actually could be both negative, then the equation is either a circle or an ellipse. If the coefficients in front of the x and y are the same, you've got a circle, and if the coefficients in front of the x squared and y squared are different, it's an ellipse. So let's review just real quick about completing the square. You already have done a little bit of review on completing the square in one of your prior assignments, but let's do this still. So what we would do here, if we want to complete the square on this problem, is we would add 7 to both sides. And when we do that, we're going to get x squared, well, that's a square right there, plus 8x, and I'm going to go ahead and put a plus blank right here, is going to equal 12 plus blank. And so we would want this to get factored, and when we complete the square, the number that goes right here in the parentheses is going to be 8 divided by 2, so we'd have x plus 4. And then when we square this, 4 squared is 16, so that's the number we add to both sides. And so we'll add these numbers to both sides, and we get 28 over here. Now, this is really the point that we need to get to for writing the equations of circles, so we won't have to go past that. But if we wanted to solve this, we would square root both sides. So we would get x plus 4 equals the square root of 28, which actually can be broken down into 4 times 7. So we would get plus or minus 2 root 7. And then we move the 4 over. So our answer would be x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 7. Okay, now for number 2, remember with a coefficient other than 1 in front of your squared term, the first thing that you have to do is you have to divide everything off. And let's see, let me go back there. Okay, so let me write now. Okay, so we would have to divide everything by 2 first here. And so then we would have y squared minus 3y plus 12 equals 0. So that's y squared minus 3y plus blank equals negative 12 plus blank. So now, for this one's a little bit harder because you're going to end up with a fraction here. You're going to have y, and negative 3 divided by 2 will get a negative 3 halves right here. And when we square that, 3 squared is 9. And 2 squared is 4, so we're adding 9 over 4 to both sides of the equation here. When we do negative 12 plus 9/4, we're going to get negative 39 over 4. And so we would square root both sides. So y minus 3/2 will equal 39. We can't break down, but we could pull the I out front. So we'll have plus or minus I root 39 over the square root of 4 is 2. So when we move that 3/2 over, we end up with y equals 3/2 plus or minus I root 39 all over 2. Or we could write that together with the 2's together there. So that's just a quick review on completing the square. If you're still having trouble with that, there is a video up that you were already supposed to look at if you needed help with that. So you might want to go back if you can't remember how to complete the square, because you'll definitely need it for this next part. So a lot of times the equations of circles that we get are not in standard form. They look like this right here. And so we can tell this is a circle because our highest x squared is, or our highest x exponent is a 2, and our highest y is also squared. So if you have an x squared and a y squared and they have the same coefficient, then you are going to be able to put this in the standard form of a circle. So what you're going to do is you're going to complete the square, but you're kind of going to do it twice. So we're going to group things together that go together. So this x squared and the negative 4x, I'm going to put here x squared minus 4x, and I'm going to put a plus blank right here, just like I do when I'm completing the square. And that sort of stays alone. And then I'm going to put the y squared and the 5y together. So y squared plus 5y, and I'm going to put a plus blank right here. And this 5, negative 5 right here, I'm just going to move it to the other side of the equal sign. So I get equals 5. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put 2 blanks on the side, and we're going to complete the square twice for each one of these. We're going to complete the square once for each one of these parentheses that we have here. So for this first one, to complete the square there, we need this to be squared. So 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2, so we'll have x minus 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so we will add a 4 right here. That means we also need to add a 4 to the other side of the equation. We need to do the same thing here with our y's. This one's a little tougher because you're going to get a fraction. You'll have y, and then 5 divided by 2, we're going to leave that as 5/2. And 5/2 squared, 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4, so we're adding 25 over 4 to both sides. So over here, you might need to do a little scratch work. You're going to end up with 9 plus 25 over 4. 9 times 4 is 36, so 36 over 4 plus 25 over 4 is going to give you 61 over 4 whenever you add those together. So this is going to equal 61 over 4. And we do need a square right there for that parentheses. So the good thing about this is you don't have to solve any further like you do with completing the square. You now have put this equation in standard form. So you don't have to do any extensive square rooting and simplifying or any of that. So now we can tell that the center of this graph would be at positive 2, negative 5/2. And then our radius, for our radius, we've got to take the square root of 61 over 4, and so we cannot take the square root of 61. We would just leave it square root of 61. Square root of 4 is 2, so we'd have square root of 61 over 2. So that would be what we would do for this first question. Okay, now this equation is a little bit different. It is still a circle because you have an x squared and a y squared, and they have the same coefficient. So with circles, what we can do is we're going to divide, let's see, we're going to divide everything here by 2, even if it does not go evenly. Now, thankfully, it does go evenly into all of these here. So we're going to have x squared plus y squared minus 2x plus 6y minus 9 equals 0. And so we're going to group like we did on the last one, x squared minus 2x plus blank, and then we'll have y squared plus 6y plus blank. We're going to take this negative 9 here, move it over to the other side, so that will equal 9 plus blank plus blank. All right, so we are going to complete the square here. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we'll have x minus 1 squared, and 1 squared is 1, so we'll put a 1 right here, which means we must add a 1 to the other side also. For the y's, 6 divided by 2 is 3, so we'll get y plus 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so we must add 9 to both sides. And then 9 plus 1 plus 9 is going to give us 19. So we now have the equation of the circle in standard form. Now we can very easily find the center. The center is going to be at 1, negative 3. And the radius will be the square root of 19. So that would be our center and our radius for this problem. Okay. Here's another one. Again, center and radius we're looking for. We will divide everything by 2. And so that is going to give us x squared plus y squared minus 10x plus 4y plus 17 equals 0. And we'll group again, x squared minus 10x plus blank plus y squared plus 4y plus blank is going to equal negative 17 plus blank plus blank. And so when we complete the square here, 10 divided by 2 is going to give us 5, so we get x minus 5. That'll be squared. 5 squared is 25, so we've got to add 25 to both sides. And then here we'll complete the square. Y plus 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so we must add a 4 here and here as well. And whenever we add our negative 17 and 25, that's going to give us 8. And 8 plus 4 is 12. So we have put this equation in standard form. Our center will be at 5, negative 2, and our radius will be the square root of 12. This will simplify into 4 times 3, so you may also see this answer given as 2 square root of 3 there for the radius. Alright, and that is all of the examples for this section. Please follow the module for the assignment that you'll have.